Okay, here we are. Say hi.
Hi,
What are you dressed as?
I'm dressed as a fireman.
Okay, let's get a good look at your uniform there. All right, pretty good. You got your patch. Got your oxygen tank here on the back. You got your helmet. Okay, what am I dressed as?
A spaceman.
Why am I dressed as a spaceman?
Because we were just looking through a space thing.
So what's today's lesson going to be about?
Space.
What was the first living thing to go to space?
A space dog!
A space dog? Yeah, that's cool. How did the dog get into space?
Let me tell Mama a space dog.
You're going to go tell Mama about it? All right, well, you go tell Mama. I'll teach the students about it, and then we'll check in later, okay?
Okay.
All right. Enjoy the lesson. Okay, let's start this lesson. This should be a quick one, hopefully the fastest one yet. Start strong, finish strong. The unit is almost done. We will start getting ready for the quiz this week. Here are the assignments you should have completed so far. There will be 5 tasks so far, as well as a guided reading, as well as the check for understanding. And today's task will be task number 6. So this unit is going to have 6 tasks in it that you need to get done before we take the quiz. You need to do the check for understanding. You need to do the guided reading. The Cold War quiz will be next week. We'll start practicing for it this week. Here's our lesson for today. Aim 7 of this unit. Why did the launch of the Soviet space satellite Sputnik start a new race between the U.S. and the Soviet Union? So let's do some review about the old race. We looked at this political cartoon in our last lesson. Which vocabulary term is this political cartoon an example of? Proliferation, brinkmanship, arms race, or mutual assured destruction. Here are those terms reviewed for you. An arms race, which is the first race that took place during the Cold War, competition between countries, in this case the Soviet Union and the United States, for more and better weapons. As they were doing this, the weapons proliferated. Proliferation increased quickly, especially the spread of nuclear weapons. Brinkmanship, as they built up all these weapons, these countries were threatening to go to war in response to any aggression perceived on their part. And along with that, there was this policy or strategy of mutual assured destruction, strategy in which the use of weapons of mass destruction by 2 or more opposing sides would cause the complete destruction of both the attacker and the defender. So in this case, both the United States and the Soviet Union had built up enough weapons in their arms race that they would completely destroy each other if it ever came down to it. Here's what we mean by that. In the political cartoon, you see the United States is labeled, Soviet Union is labeled. Both countries have brought with them their missiles. If one was ever to attack the other would attack back. Both would end up being dead. So this is an example of, obviously, the arms race is why they built up the weapons, which led to proliferation of weapons, spread of nuclear weapons, thousands of weapons built up. Brinkmanship, they're ready to go to war over anything, and if they do, they will completely destroy each other. Some people say this makes us less safe. Some people argue this makes us more safe because we know that the weapons will never be used. But if they are, it's all over. All right, so we're talking about a new race, a race between the United States and the Soviet Union in space. So this is an event that happened that caused fear for many Americans, and it doesn't have to do with any military technology. So in 1957, the Soviets announced the development of a rocket that could travel great distances. We talked about this last time. It's called an Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, or ICBM. They used one of these missiles to push Sputnik, the first unmanned satellite, above Earth's atmosphere. So they got a satellite to go into orbit around the Earth. This was shocking at the time. It's hard to imagine today, but Sputnik's launch practically caused a panic in the US. Here is a replica of Sputnik. It was only about the size of a basketball, the ball-shaped portion that you see there, with the other wires sort of coming off of it. But this basketball-sized satellite caused a near panic in the US. Why? Why would this cause so much panic? Well, many Americans thought if the Russians, or Soviets, could send a satellite into space, could they also launch one of these missiles at major US cities? Fearing that the Soviets were well ahead in technology, including military rockets, the US undertook a crash program, meaning really fast program, to catch up to the Soviets. Americans felt they had fallen behind in science and technology, and the government poured money into science education, into programs such as NASA to catch up to the Soviets. One of the reasons that we have science programs in school actually comes from the space race, trying to catch up to the Soviets in space. So here's our vocabulary today. You need to know Sputnik, Soviet satellite, first satellite to be placed in orbit. That happened in 1957. So this is early in the Cold War, and it led to what's called the space race. Cold War competition, not for better weapons, but between the US and Soviet Union for better achievements in the field of space explorations. And when this started, the Soviets dominated the space race. As we already know, they sent the first man-made object out to orbit the Earth, and that was Sputnik, first satellite orbiting the Earth. They sent the first animal into orbit, a dog named Laika, the space dog, in 1958. They sent the first human artifact to reach all the way to the moon. They put the first man in space. They put the first woman in space. They conducted the first space walk, getting out of a spacecraft, walking in space. Here's a photo of Laika. Laika became the first animal launched into orbit, paving the way for human space flight. We'll look at a chart here showing the space race. So the US started out behind. You'll see a red line and a blue line on this graph. The red line represents Soviet accomplishments. The blue line represents accomplishments by the US. You see the two lines there. The Soviets are ahead, and then it switches. And the Americans, the United States, finally catches up at a certain point, and they win an important part of the space race, which was called the moon race. The United States is first to the moon. They landed on the moon, planted the American flag there in 1969, and this was a huge accomplishment in the Cold War in showing that the United States could get there first before the Soviets. A lot of money was spent on this. Some people, looking back, say, was that the best use of our money? We'll talk about that in a moment. The space race ended later on when the Soviets and the Americans began working together. In this photo, a Soviet cosmonaut, more difficult to see him there, and an American astronaut are shaking hands at the International Space Station to signify the end of the space race. So, as I alluded to earlier, a lot of money was spent on this. A lot of money is still spent on space exploration. For example, we send satellites into space. We have sent objects out to Mars to conduct probes of Mars. Some people are talking about doing human space flight for tourist space, like people who are wealthy enough to pay to go into space. Should they be able to spend money to travel into space? Talking about trying to go back to the moon, establish some sort of living structure on the moon, maybe try to send people to Mars. Very, very expensive, right? So, do you think it's worthwhile for governments to spend large amounts of money funding space research? Or would that money be better spent on other problems, such as fighting poverty and hunger? So, on one side of this, some scientists have questioned the value of the space shuttle programs, space station programs, and critics of NASA have complained in recent years that the agency lacks direction and the space program is adrift. We already got to the moon. What's really the point of all this money that we're spending? However, many inventions created for space exploration are used daily to save lives, improve environmental sustainability, keep humans healthy, etc. Here's some examples of things that come from space exploration. Scratch-resistant lenses on glasses and other items that use lenses. Firefighting equipment, their clothing is made from a similar fabric as astronauts have used. Laser eye surgery. Camera phones even started out being used in space, the technology in camera phones. Baby formula was improved by space exploration, need to sustain astronauts in space with formulas. Portable computers first used in space. Infrared thermometers, which are certainly very, very important today, started out being used for space in order to determine the temperatures of other planets, the temperature of the surface of other planets, so it's still used today. All right, so what are we doing today? You are going to read this article about the space race, starting with Sputnik, goes up to the end of the moon race, and it focuses especially on the response in the Soviet Union to this accomplishment by the United States. You will then complete Cold War task number 6, multiple choice, 5 questions. Don't forget to click on submit. Some students had some issues with Google Forms previously in which they filled out the form but did not click on submit. All right, as always, don't forget, we hope that you are safe and you are healthy. We started the unit strong. You're going to finish the unit strong. Have you completed tasks 1 through 5, as well as the check for understanding? Task 6 will be the final task of this part of the unit. We'll start preparing for our Unit 11A Cold War quiz this week, and we'll take the quiz next week. Thank you. Good night and good luck. Okay, so did you teach Mama about the space dog? Okay, what else do you want to talk about?
There was the first thing that went in outer space was a space dog.
We already talked about that. And then what happened? What went to the moon?
And the first other thing that went to outer space was a space person that went to the moon.
Yeah. And that's pretty cool. And then what do you have here with you? What are these tools you want to show everyone?
This is how they chop wood.
Okay, the firefighters?
From the fire.
Okay.
And this is how they chop the fire.
Okay, and what's this one?
How they burnt the fire.
You mean to spray it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does this fire hose work of yours?
It slinks up.
All right,
I don't want to slink up.
You don't want to unslink it? Here, show them how it unslinks.
Okay, unslink it like that.
Should we unslink it all the way? No? Okay. Anything else you want to teach the students about? No? Okay.